Court of Trigo County, Kansas. It's in the
Cashew
matter of
nuts
Nikita
with peanut
Kasap,
sauce.
case number 2025
That sounds pretty good.
MR17. Counsel announce appearances, please.
Gosh,
May
man,
it
I
please
love
the court,
curry
Your
made with
Honor.
peanuts. It's
State
so
of
good.
Kansas appears via Trigo County Attorney Abraham Fahnensteel.
Do you want to push
May it
that?
please the court,
Push
Your Honor,
above.
Mackenzie McCoy on
Okay,
behalf
this is
of the
the first
juvenile
one.
Nikita Kasap, who also
Okay, nearest
appears
to here.
in person over Zoom.
Gosh, peanuts
I
make
have in
everything
front of
better,
me-
dude, for real. They're so good.
A criminal
Wow,
complaint,
first time. Nice.
fugitive complaint
Level
out of the
7. Very good.
state of
I
Wisconsin,
love Thai
uh,
curry with peanuts, dude. Yeah.
village of
Man, some of the
Waukesha,
curry I had in
Waukesha County,
Thailand was
Wisconsin,
freaking bomb, dude. Yo, I had a freaking curry
and a
pizza
fugitive
there.
warrant also out of
We had curry
Wisconsin.
pizza in Thailand. It was unbelievable. So good.
Based upon the fugitive warrant and
3.
complaint, believe at this point it is the best interest of justice that Mr. Kasap remains in the detention center in
4.
Garden City, Kansas. Either attorney wish to weigh in on that?
Your Honor, I talked to my client just a little bit about that, understanding kind of the position he's in, and we understand that's position we have to take at this time.
Also, did you go through the extradition process with him?
I did, Your Honor. I believe he has signed a waiver of extradition form there in front of him.
Mr. Kasap, there's a form there that says waiver of extradition, in which I printed your name at the top. And it says that you will voluntarily return with accredited agents out of the state of Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, would you sign on the line above? I think I wrote in juvenile, actually. And what I've done is given the state of Wisconsin until the 15th of March to secure your return back to Wisconsin. Counsel, I think I'm going to set a hearing for March 15th just to make sure that has happened. And I don't know what anybody's calendar is. Well, actually, it's a Saturday, so
Yeah.
we're all going to be off. So why don't I set it on the following Monday? Is anybody available on the 17th of March?
I am, Your Honor, at 1:30. If we could do it over Zoom, again, that would work for me.
That works for us, Your Honor.
Make sure it works for me. 1:30 on the 17th, and it'll be a Zoom hearing. Mr. Kasap, if you have been picked up by authorities from Wisconsin, we won't have that hearing, all right? You understand that?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Officer, if you would get that waiver of extradition back to, I don't know who sent it to you, the sheriff's office maybe?
Sorry, Judge, we lost you for just a little bit.
There you go. If you could get that waiver of extradition that's signed back to the whichever office sent it to you, I would sign that. We will get you all the necessary paperwork with the file stamp on it.
Very good, Judge. We can make that happen. I just wanted to clarify, you said that if they come pick him up, we are free to go ahead and cut him loose to the Wisconsin.
Yes, if they appear to pick him up, he can be released to their, and I can write that on here somewhere if you'd like.
Very good. Please, Judge. Thank you.
You could see from watching that Nikita did not have much to say over Zoom during this hearing, and it was a brief hearing. And now the clock starts for authorities in Wisconsin to get him from Kansas and bring him back to the Badger State, and they have until March 15th to do that. Joining us now is retired detective with the NYPD, crime scene investigator Ed Wallace. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you looked through the criminal complaint as well. That did shed a lot of details on this case, though there are still a lot of unknowns. In your experience, if you were called to this scene, you walk into the house, you have this stepfather who's dead, the mom who is dead as well. As an investigator, what are some of your first steps in trying to figure out what happened?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that I'm there legally. So I would be looking for a warrant or some type of consent. Absent consent, because there's nobody there to give you consent, and the defendant is also residing at this address, I'd be asking the lead detective, please go get a warrant. And then once we got the warrant, I'd make legal entry. But the first thing I'm going to do is a crime scene walkthrough around the exterior of this residence, to look for forced entry anywhere, to see if there's any signs of broken windows, broken doors. How did the persons get in and out? Because remember, at this time, we don't know that the son is the defendant. We don't know that he is in fact the person that killed the two occupants, the mother and the father. Once that occurs, I'm going to document everything photographically on the outside, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside. I'm going to put my PPE on, my personal protective equipment. I'm going to put a Tyvek suit with booties, gloves, hood, mask, eye protection. So I'm protecting the scene from me, and I'm also protecting the scene's evidence in its integrity. I'm going to go in, I'm going to walk around, take copious written notes of what I'm observing and what I'm seeing, what I'm smelling, and so forth and so on. Once I've done that, I'm going to back out and then re-enter, taking all my crime scene photographs. After I complete my photographs, I'll do a sketch. I'll maybe do some 3D laser scans of everything, so that I've documented everything as I found it, where I found it, in situ, as we say. Well, once that's all done, then I can begin to move things. Once I've documented everything thoroughly. And in the case of the mother, I believe she was covered in blankets and other materials from the house. So I'm going to slowly remove them, changing my gloves in between each item that I'm touching, and packaging these things up to potentially go to the lab for further analysis, for trace transfer evidence, gunshot residue, and things of that nature. Now, I understand the mother appeared in the complaint to have an exit wound in the back of her head, and that there appeared to be an entrance into a wall in that area where she was found. So I'm going to do thorough documentation photographically of that, and both the mother's wounds and the ballistic damage to the wall. After I do that, I'm going to get extensive measurements, 3D laser scans of all of this, so I have the exact height of the victim and the location of the height of the bullet wound in the victim's head. Obviously, then we're going to roll the body over and examine the front of the body, looking for the entrance wound, if in fact that is accurate, and document it. Now, from those two wounds, the heights of those wounds, and then the hole in the back, if they're all associated, then we can do ballistic trajectory analysis. And then I would also be looking at the entrance wound for the presence of gunshot residue, stippling, burnt and unburnt gunpowders that may be around the entrance wound. And now we know in this case that a .357 Magnum was recovered in the son's car, the defendant's car. We can take that and the ammunition, if there is gunshot residue patterns around the entrance wound of the mother, and then we can do target to distant testing to determine how far away that gun was when it was discharged to create the entrance wound on the mother. So we can do all of that there as well. Now, since the defendant lives there with the victims, a lot of times fingerprints and DNA are meaningless. But in this case, we would still process like the firearm that was recovered from the vehicle for DNA and also for fingerprints, even though it's in his possession. And also he has their identification.
Has anyone else seen this video of Extentation talking about Drake? Did anyone notice the background? I'm dropping Rackingtons. Watch.
Rackington's on.
What is that?
If I'm gonna die or ever be a sacrifice, I want to make sure that my life.
It didn't comport with the narrative that they want.
You ask how many girls I've been with in my life. I tell you I stopped keeping count when I was 25.
On the 18th of June in 2018, Jahzeh Onfroy, better known as XXXTentacion, was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle shop in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Jahzeh Onfroy, better known as XXXTentacion, was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle, better known as XXXTentacion, was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle shop in Deerfield. Tentacion was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle shop in Deerfield Beach, Florida, leaving tens of millions of people around the world in shock and speech. Was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle shop. XXXTentacion was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motor Freud, better known as XXXTentacion, was murdered in broad daylight after leaving Freud, better known as XXXTentacion, was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle shop in Deerfield. Tentacion was murdered in broad daylight after leaving a motorcycle shop in Deerfield Beach, Florida, leaving tens of millions of people around the world in shock and sadness, as one of the most talented rappers of our generation was seemingly taken away from us for no reason. With X's murder being so random and out of nowhere, it left many fans in a deep state of confusion. Why would someone kill X? He never had any real enemies, nor was he involved in any street stuff. Well, this was until fans started looking back at X's career, where they saw X constantly speaking out about a certain rapper after he supposedly stole one of his songs. If anybody kills me, it was Drake. I'm snitching right now, which X posted just 4 months before his death, or when Drake said the lines SMS XXX, supposedly meaning send my shooters at XXXTentacion, on his song I'm Upset, released 23 days before the Florida rapper's death. Something definitely seemed off, and it wasn't only fans delving into these theories, as Drake's name has been brought up multiple times during X's trial, with him even being summoned to court. So did Drake kill XXXTentacion? Let's bring it all the way back to 2015, where at this point in time, Drake was at the top of the world, releasing one of the biggest hits of the year, Hotline Bling. Whilst X was still a 17-year-old kid in the streets of Broward County, he was recording and uploading music to SoundCloud as a means of trying to move past his life of crime. Well, towards the end of that year, X would get his first glimpse of success when he dropped the song Look At Me. Now, the song didn't actually blow up immediately, as it actually took around 2 years for it to chart, where it would debut at the 34th position on the Billboard Hot 100, which was a crazy achievement for someone of X's size back at that time. Now, whilst the song was blowing up, Drake would actually be on his Boy Meets World tour, where at a show in Amsterdam with UK artist Giggs, he would preview a song called KMT, which sounded very similar to XXXTentacion's Look At Me.
Okay, dude, okay. Demon just got out. I gave my bro an advance. Love is just not in my plan. Not even taking a check. Hey.
You see, Drake already has a track record of stealing artists' flows, so to many fans, it wouldn't even come as a shock that he's doing it again. Now, this would actually cause a lot of controversy online between Drake and X fans, especially as at this point in time, X was in jail for armed home invasion and battery. Especially as at this point in time, X was in jail for armed Drake and X fans. Especially as at this point in time, X was in jail for between Drake and X fan. Now, this would actually cause a lot of controversy online between Drake and X fans, especially as at this point in time, X was in jail for armed home invasion and battery charges. So stealing flows from incarcerated rappers wasn't a good look. Drake would be the first one to address this issue, which was probably because X couldn't as he was still in jail.
People go so far, they reach so far. Like the other day, you know, I dropped the song with Giggs, and I'm seeing all this on my IG under like some random picture of people being like, you took this kid's flow or whatever, right? So I'm just like, yo, what's happening to me right now, you know? So I'm sitting there, I'm trying to read, like figure out who they're talking about. I find out who they're talking about. I go, the extension guy. I don't even think that's how you say his name. But yeah, that's I tried to practice. They call him X. So anyway, I go and I find what song they're talking about, you know? And
now I'm blending my eyelashes with the false lashes with some mascara, putting away my makeup, and yeah, that's the look. Thanks for coming with me to do my makeup. This,
you know,
and I smelled it from the bathroom.
I'm just like, yo, it's crazy that people think that after all this time, after all I've been through, that I'm the type of person to go decrease some song that's on SoundCloud. It doesn't have like 2 plays. It has plays. You know, he has his cult following, and go and think that I'm gonna like take that and make it my own. Like, I'm not stupid. I'm not like a person like that, you know?
Now, Drake actually seemed pretty level-headed about this situation, but I guess you can be when you're already cemented in the industry with an insanely successful career, unlike X, who had nothing to his name and was facing years in prison. Eventually, X himself would actually catch wind of Drake supposedly stealing his flow, as during a jail visit, one of his friends would inform him of what had happened. As on the 19th of February, just a month after Drake previewed KMT in Amsterdam, the incarcerated rapper would tweet, "Now this fella trying to play it safe and play it innocent, but it's cool, we all know Hotline Bling was a buy of Cha-Cha. I'm not the first fella he bit, nor will I be the last. Drake a fella, money don't buy you respect." Which would then follow up with, "Drake's career is almost over, he better start investing money into real estate, cause once it's all over, he really gonna see the fake love." It's funny how the industry let this fella sit at the top for so long. All you'll suck, med done chat. And whilst in jail, X managed to get on the phone with popular hip-hop YouTuber Academics, where he would come at Drake for stealing his flow and not showing love back to him.
Now, what I really wanted to speak on in this call is the entire Drake situation, give it a little more publicity, because in all honesty, this guy's just going to keep running off and doing this shit, and nobody's going to stop him if I don't. You know what I'm saying? If I don't bring it to the light and make somebody and form some sort of opposition or defense towards that. You know what I'm saying? And I really want to call this situation out.
Yo, what's up? I'm the Jewish Hammer. This is my first time in Scrapper.
Wait, hold on, right before you say, because I don't know if you saw the most recent development. So, your former manager, which is Adam, right?
Turn up, Bill.
He actually and he actually, I guess, maybe he spoke to someone like off record, but they brought him onto the podcast, and they kind of went a little bit more in detail. So, supposedly it was. Okay, yes, so they brought in DJ Carnage or whatever. Now, I spoke to DJ Carnage talk to me. According to him, he says Drake, he mentioned you to Drake, not Drake went to him trying to get to you. You get me? So when Drake did an interview with, I think it was DJ Carnage on Beats for the Radio, he said that his snippet went out, or people started hearing the snippet, then your fans or people who like it and commented your name. Then, according to him, he said he went and looked you up. So it made it seem like he didn't know who you were until that point. And you're saying, nah, what was
it? All right. 22 seconds into the first round, we have a KO. Your winner, Kaneki.
Long before the videos, long before he was exposed for what he did.
22 seconds into the first round, we have a KO. Your winner, Kaneki.
Eventually in March, X would actually be given probation, meaning he would be released from jail, where he made it his number
22 seconds into the first round, we have a KO.
As on the same day of his release, he would do an interview where he would call out Drake, revealing that Drake actually contacted one of his close DJs.
I saw this video of a lady pushing a robot, and
what's the situation between you and Drake? Do you guys
Fuck
have beef?
fools.
Are you guys cool?
You know, all the comments are just saying, like, "Oh, you shouldn't push robot. You know, you can't abuse a robot." Like, no, you can abuse a robot. That's the only thing left we have as humans is we can abuse robots. You know, I'm sick of these tin jockeys. Just push them, whatever. It's like, oh, you can do parkour. One of the lamest things for a human being to do. You can do that.
Yeah.
Real cool, you clanker. There's only 4 robots that I respect. That's my Nintendo Switch, the maid from the Jetsons, Mecha Godzilla, and my trash can that has a sensor on it and the lid opens on its own. Those are the 4. Every other robot,
okay,
fuck them. I mean, everyone in the comments is so afraid, like, oh, what's going to happen when the robots take over and kill all the humans? It's like, I don't know. I won't have to do my taxes or figure out what to eat for lunch every day.
So you in jail,
I'll be nice. And then what, the world is just full of robots? It's like, all right, have fun just beeping and booping at each other, you oil jockeys.
From the UK, you know what I'm saying? He dropped the video
I was talking to my girl at the time, not the same bitch that got me arrested, a different girl.
Okay.
I was talking to her at the time, and she was like, "Yo, listen to no."
Gotta pull up. Let's see what we get.
My dog Chris, I was on the phone with my
Oh,
dog Chris.
what are
He's like, "Yo,
these?
you gotta listen to this."
They got
this
the
Drake.
Jordan 4s.
That's exactly what he said.
How much?
Like, this the Drake.
40?
You gotta listen to
That's
this.
a
So
steal.
he plays this.
Also got
I hear
the
da-da-da-da-da
Jordan
like that. I'm like,
3s.
what the f- As soon
How
as it
much?
started, like I knew he was getting that. And the funny thing is,
Had the
we didn't
Colin
discover the
Kaepernick.
fan, like you said, the fans, because
No
they're so
way.
cold. Like, it's like
They got
got a
the
piece of the
Kobe
internet. You feel me?
So they were saying that Drake was
For
biting
only
your
13?
style. That's what the fans were saying.
They also
Oh
got the
hell
Chrome
yeah,
Jordan
bro!
6s.
You could take
They
his
also
verse,
got the
like they did a
Kobe's.
mashup. They put his verse
Another
on my
pair of
song,
Kobe's
and the
for
cadence is
15.
literally just at the same
even
tempo.
got the
But
Jordan 1
the thing
mids
is, Drake never ended up contacting
10.
his manager,
LeBron
but
James
instead
Miami
that
Heat
same
jersey
week,
for
he
$7.99.
would
They got
preview
the
his song
Ray
in KMT in
Allen.
Amsterdam. If you
Then
ask
had a
me,
pair of
it's definitely a
KDs
bit fishy.
for
The same
20,
week you
that's a
contacted
steal.
X's team, you end
Ooh.
up flaking on them and
They
then
got some
preview
Air
a
Max
song with the
1s,
exact same
Nike
flow
ID
as X's
for
biggest
15,
hit. Doing an interview calling out
$7.99.
Drake
They
on his
got the
first day
LeBron
out wasn't
James.
enough for X though, as he would
No
also
way.
begin disrespecting
The
Drake's
Jordan
mother.
1
Drake was kinda
Bloodlines
cute, she could get it,
for
but X wouldn't
30?
draw the line there and would
That's a
continue
steal.
trolling
It
Drake
was
and his
not
family
playing
on social
around today.
media. As just a day after that
Yes,
tweet,
sir.
he would make his profile picture an edited family photo of Drake
Gotta
with his
pull up,
mother
let's see what
and
we get.
stepdad, with X
Oh,
putting his
what are these? They got the Jordan 4s. How much? 40? That's a steal. Also got the Jordan 3s. How much? $8? Had the Colin Kaepernick. No way. They got the Kobe Easters for only 13. They also got the Chrome Jordan 6s. They also got the Kobe's. Another pair of Kobe's for 15. They even got the Jordan 1 mids for 10. LeBron James Miami Heat jersey, so $7.99. They got the Ray Allen. Even had a pair of KDs for 20. That's a steal. Ooh. They got some Air Max 1s, Nike ID for 15. $7.99. They got the LeBron James. No way. The Jordan 1 Bloodlines for 30. That's a steal. It was not playing around today. Yes, sir.
Michael, I'll buy all your shoes, please. Michael, please, man. I got all your rings, Mike. I got every number.
Ass. Oh, absolutely. Mike. Absolutely. Mike, just look this way, please. Mike.
Michael, you want the field? Xavier, where's the second car?
I have one back here.
Wait, Lucas.
Michael Jordan.
Yes. Michael, you want the field?
Meeting anybody in the motherfucking world, nigga. No motherfucking peace, nigga. No motherfucking, no motherfucking, meeting anybody, no motherfucking meeting anybody in the motherfucking world, nigga. No motherfucking peace, nigga. You mean to tell me can't nobody take no jumps on you? Your son or your wife.
In 1997, id Software would develop Quake 2, the sequel to the already original groundbreaking masterpiece from 1995. While very familiar in terms of gameplay, Quake 2 was a natural evolution of the original in almost every way. Gone was the bite-sized campaign episodes of the original game in favour of a single story. The sequel would feature a cohesive story arc with mission-based objectives and the introduction of in-game cutscenes via full-motion video sequences. But perhaps the biggest change around would be the technology. The Quake 2 engine was a significant enhancement upon the original. The engine would come out of the box supporting all popular 3D graphics cards on the market. This meant that graphical enhancements including shadowing, light mapping, texture filtering, and alpha blending, these types of effects all became attainable with a 3D graphics card. And of course, the colored lighting and much brighter palettes over the original game was the star of the show. id Software was the very first to do it, and they did it in style. Quake 2 was probably one of the very first games to really push the whole PC Master Race war. You needed a fast processor like a Pentium and a 3D effects card like a Voodoo 2 to get a decent frame rate out of the game. Anything higher would require a faster 3D effects card or an SLI configuration or even a Voodoo 5500 card, which was the best in class at the time. And yet, with the demands of the game to PC hardware, it managed to find its way on consoles in the form of the Nintendo 64 version and the focus of today's episode, the incredible PlayStation 1 port. The PS1 version of Quake 2 is one of the most fascinating ports ever developed. Many believed it was impossible to port even the first Quake to Sony's console, and although it was rumored to be in development, it never appeared. It seemed like Quake 2 would be out of the question, but here we are. Quake 2 on the PlayStation was developed by Hammerhead Studios, and they took upon the challenge themselves to see if it was possible to port the much more sophisticated sequel, and as we know, they were able to pull it off. But let's be clear, this was not lightning in a bottle. Hammerhead was a company formed by Chris Stanforth, who previously worked at Traveller's Tales and had much experience in making games. Before Quake 2 on the PlayStation, Hammerhead would develop Shadow Master, a vehicular-based first-person action title released for both the PS1 and the PC. Although the game was criticized for its gameplay, it was much praised for its excellent 3D technology with fast rendering and very cool post-processing effects. It's a beautiful looking game even to this day, and it's at least worth a look.
Prepare for battle.
Hammerhead was reading all about Quake 2 in magazines and how it was deemed impossible to accomplish on the PlayStation, and having just came off the release of Shadow Master, decided to take up the challenge. According to Chris, for Quake 2 we're using a completely new engine. The one we used for Shadow Master was tailored precisely towards the needs of that project. In short, it was efficient but limited. At the time, we were reading all this stuff about Quake being impossible to do on the PSX, which we thought was just untrue. As a result, we redesigned the game engine from scratch with an eye to providing all the functionality required for a game like Quake, or better yet Quake 2, which hadn't been released at that point, along with the capability to handle multiple split screens, the objective being to build an engine powerful enough to handle any sort of game we desired to do in the future. Now, when you play the game for the very first time, you really can't believe that the console is delivering something so demanding and polished beyond anything that the PlayStation was really meant to handle, with only a few concessions here and there. In many ways, while it's still Quake 2, it doesn't appear to look like a PlayStation 1 title at all. In fact, it looks like a variation of the software renderer used on Quake 2 on the PC. And according to Chris, he says, obviously we can't compete with a high-end PC with state-of-the-art graphic acceleration, but we do believe that our version will look superior to the original using software rendering at a comparable resolution. And you immediately notice this as you start playing through the game. The frame rate especially is very good, running at 30 frames per second. Now, of course, there are bits of slowdown here and there where there are more enemies on screen at once, but otherwise the game runs at a very good level of performance. Now, I did mention there are concessions that were made for the PlayStation version, and the biggest one that you're probably going to notice early on is the loading time. If you're familiar with Quake 2 levels on the PC, there are going to be sections of the game on the PlayStation 1 version which have loading times, and this is because of the PlayStation's limited amount of memory, which makes it impossible for the entire amount of level, asset, and map data to be stored in a single load. This means that anytime you kind of walk down a narrow corridor in Quake 2 on the PlayStation, you're probably going to expect a brief loading. And according to Chris, memory usage is always the biggest problem on the PSX, and a prime example of why PC conversions frequently turn out disappointing. In the case of the larger levels, we've had to institute mid-level loading. We've tried to make this as quick and unobtrusive as possible, so hopefully it won't detract anything from the gameplay. Necessity has dictated, to some extent, the choices we've made in simplifying some of the more complex sections, but wherever possible, we've taken id Software's advice on which levels are the best included. Another reason why many believe Quake 2 was not possible on the PlayStation was because of its lack of floating point values. Most modern computers have support for floating point numbers, and when we think about the original PS1, everything is integer-based. This is why when you place a game, you see textures and geometry snap into place rather abruptly. There is simply no floating point precision. However, the PlayStation 1 does support fixed point numbers. So in other words, a fixed 8.3 number denotes an 8-bit integer number with the three most right bits denoted as the fractional portion. And these fixed point calculations were all rewritten in native machine code to take full advantage of the PlayStation 1's processor. However, the even bigger challenge would be how to render Quake 2 map geometry on the PlayStation. Binary space partitions or BSP trees that were used in Quake 2 on the PC would be much too slow and memory intensive on the PlayStation hardware. Of course, the PS1 was designed to push many triangles around on the screen every single frame. But at 30 FPS, with a fully texture mapped world, including all game logic, would be a significant challenge. The PlayStation 1 has no concept of hardware that supports depth, or in other words, there is no Z buffer. And to do this, polygons must be sent in the order that they should be drawn from front to back, based on the distance from the camera. This is what's known as the painter's algorithm. Hammerhead would develop a very optimized object clipping algorithm, which is probably one of the most single important features of the game. When you walk into a room as you approach walls, each triangle splits into much smaller ones. Now, it might appear as though that more triangles are being generated for free. However, this is not the case. What's happening is the triangles outside of the viewport are being clipped to make room for new triangles. This is one major addition to what I believe makes Quake 2 on the PlayStation 1 stand out, and this feature is designed to elegantly reduce as much texture warping as possible. It's certainly not perfect, the game still does have texture warping in places, but what is here is very well crafted. Now, other differences between the PC version also include level alterations. There are a few levels from the PC that have been removed in full from the PlayStation single-player game, but there's also some rearrangements to existing levels that really do cater for the PlayStation's memory requirements, and as a part of this, there are deathmatch maps that have been specifically constructed for the PS1 version. Now, another change that has been included in Quake 2 on the PlayStation is that the controls are different. Now, this is something that is a bit of a sticking point for many people that have played Quake 2 on the PlayStation 1. There's really no good control scheme that you can select from with the original PlayStation 1 controller. However, if you do have a PlayStation mouse, and let me tell you, if you are thinking about getting a PlayStation mouse, Quake 2 on the PlayStation 1 is the game that you want to get the mouse for, because once you connect up a PlayStation mouse to this game, it transforms it into something that is very close to the PC version. Now, the way that it works is that you use the mouse control with your right hand, assuming you are right-handed of course, and then you use the directional pad with your other hand to move your character forward and back. Now, this may sound a little clunky in practice, but let me tell you, in execution, it actually feels very, very natural. It feels like that you're pressing keys on a keyboard with your left hand and controlling the game with the mouse, simulating a WASD keyboard layout. And I personally think that this is the way to go if you do want to play Quake 2 on the PlayStation 1. Now, there are patches that you can download that allow the game to be patched with better controls, and I will leave a link to one that I use in the description below. This does involve downloading a ROM and patching it, but the result will be a very good experience. But for me, you can't really get away without using a mouse for this game. It's just the way to play Quake 2. Now, other additions to the game include new enemies, which include the Spider Cyborg that has the twin rail guns, and this is exclusive to the PS1 version, as well as the split screen up to 4-player deathmatch modes, and this particular mode is excellent. This is probably the PlayStation's answer to GoldenEye, even though GoldenEye was obviously a much more successful game in the end. But what's immediately impressive about the multiplayer deathmatch modes is that the speed, the frame rate, and the graphics haven't been reduced in any notable way. It still runs at a great frame rate at 30 frames per second, even with all this going on at the same time. This version really does maintain the sense of speed and playability from the original Solo game. So in conclusion, I can't talk highly about Quake 2 on the PlayStation. For me, it's the best FPS on the console. It takes all the key areas of the PC version and carefully provides them on the PlayStation and takes full advantage of its console limitations. It's an absolute cracking port that has been masterfully programmed with the care and attention that you don't really expect to see. Quake 2 on the PS1 is one of those killer apps that you want to show off to your friends about why the PS1 was such the best gaming console going around at the time. And I do think that anyone who is interested in FPS shooters and admires the PlayStation should experience it for themselves. And I think it's one of the most technically impressive ports on the PlayStation itself, and one that you should definitely take a look at. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts about the Quake 2 impossible PlayStation 1 port in the comments below. Do you agree that it's an impossible port? Do you disagree? I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. But we are going to leave it here. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye for now.
Oh yeah! For satisfaction. What a ride! Keeping my knees in the breeze.
If you're into PC games running on DOS, it wouldn't get much better than the year 1996. We saw games such as Tomb Raider, Daggerfall, Civilization 2, Crusader, Red Alert, and Duke Nukem 3D all releasing in that same year. But there was one release from 1996 that would completely change video games.
Radiant's courier has been killed.
Quake is one of the most influential first-person shooters ever made. Its DNA is still in many a modern FPS, and even recently we would see a remaster 25 years later. Now, many of you already know about Quake and its history, and the story of John Carmack, John Romero, and the rest of the id Software team has already been discussed many times, and we are not revisiting that story here. In today's episode then, we are going to take a look at the underground piracy scene, and how Quake would be one of the biggest scandals to ever rock that scene. If you've heard about scene groups, such as Razor 1911, Prestige, Hybrid, and Paradigm, then you'll be right at home here. And for those that haven't, don't worry. We'll explain what these groups are and how they operate. Since the earliest games were released on home computers in the late 70s, there existed individuals who wanted to make copies of those games, either individual backups to preserve the originals for safekeeping, or to distribute or sell to other people. This circumvention is known as software piracy. And game studios and publishers were well aware of this, of course, and started to introduce measures to stop duplication from occurring. Some of these methods we've covered before on the channel, including CD-based DRM, code wheels, fuzzy and weak bits, bad sectors on disk, dongle-based protection, the list goes on. There were many attempts to mitigate, and most of the time, these attempts failed. So while game publishers stepped up the fight against duplication, coordinated groups and teams known as scene or cracking groups would be formed, and they would acquire the release of a new game, remove its copy protection, also known as cracking, then release the game on bulletin boards worldwide and later on FTP servers. This process was not done by one individual. Suppliers in the group would source the game. Often, they would be able to get a hold of the game, usually before street dates. Then the crackers would remove the protection from the game and usually add an intro, or what's known as a cracktro, to let everyone know that they were first. Then the couriers would be responsible for spreading the release worldwide. Now it's a little more complicated than this, but this is usually how things worked. And while there was some honor and respect between these groups, the reality is your group wanted to beat the competition to to see who could crack and release the game fastest. This release then would be available to the end user to download, install, and run on their PCs. The scene would also have somewhat of a governing body, known as the Software Pirates Association. They would be responsible for either allowing a release to go through to bulletin boards or to what's known as nuking, which is the removal of the release on all bulletin boards and FTP sites. There were two main rules when it came to scene group releases. First, no betas. Only a final retail release would be accepted. And second, the crack had to work properly. If it crashed on the PC or introduced any other side effects, then it would be fair game for another group to come in and win the release. If your group was first, your release would stand and everyone else's would be nuked. The competition was absolutely fierce. Due to the nature of these scene groups and what they were doing, there was always that risk of being raided by the feds. This meant that the groups would use aliases and scene names rather than their individual names. They would communicate on group-only IRC servers. Most of the time, the public never had any insight as to how these groups ran and how many members, for example, were in each group. They would mostly communicate via .nfo files. A .nfo file is a text file that was accompanied with a scene release. This one, for example, was done by the group Fairlight. They usually contain some notes about the release, how to install it, and optionally some group informational greetings. And then you would not hear about that group again until the next time.
Twins. There we go.
1996's release of Quake would be one game that would be hotly contested by every scene group that was around. Who could supply, crack and release Quake first? This would result in some serious street cred and respect. Quake was easily the biggest release of the year and certainly the most anticipated. Any group that got their hands on Quake first would have a place at the table with heavyweights like Razer 1911 and Prestige. In 1995, a new release group entered the scene and quickly rose up the ranks to become very popular and established. The group's name was ROR, which stood for Release on Rampage. The leader, Ash Asvilden, had the scene name TKLP, which was short for That Crazy Little Punk. TKLP was already in various scene groups before ROR and had good connections to suppliers and crackers. And when ROR went into 1996, they were going in full of momentum. Around the same time, id Software released Q-Test. It was a way for players to test out the deathmatch features of Quake as sort of a public beta test for the release. While buggy, it was also very popular and was used by many until the official shareware release of Quake at the end of 1996. But only 11 days before shareware full version of Quake was leaked to the internet. This was confirmed by id Software to be what was known as Beta 3, and while close to the official retail release, contained some differences. But since it contains the entire game, including all campaigns, it was clearly software piracy. On June 21st, 1996, one day before Quake's official release, ROR would release the retail version of Quake, beating out all other release groups for the crown. The NFO file celebrated ROR's victory. Here it is, the Duke 3D Killer, brought to you just like expected by ROR 1996. But sceners quickly realized there was something up with this release. It ended up being the exact same file size as the Beta 3 leak, and the version contained the same README file indicating that it was a pre-release. However, it would have some changes in its executable, notably wording changes, and the biggest difference is that the word beta was completely stripped out. But even still, something fell off. When pressed on the matter, TKLP said the following: well, it's the final pre-release. The difference between ours and the actual final that will be in stores is we don't have the 400 megs of music, no modem play, and you can't hack up dead bodies. Without anyone else's word, this seemed like a plausible explanation. After all, this was the full release of Quake. ROR claimed that Quake was supplied to them by an inside man that they had working at id Software, and this should have been the end of the story. TKLP had convinced the scene that this was the final release of Quake, and the release stood firm. But the release would be anything but final. What had actually occurred was TKLP had taken the Beta 3 leak, stripped out the word beta completely from the executable and repackaged it, uploaded it to bulletin boards and labeled the release as final under the ROR name in an attempt to win the race to see who could release Quake first. And he almost got away with it, except id Software themselves would stop him dead in his tracks. Jay Wilbur, who worked at id Software at the time, confirmed that the ROR release was actually a repackaged Beta 3 leak, and further exposed TKLP as making the release as final by manipulating the executable. Word on the street is that you may be the source of the Quake 3 beta leak. My sources tell me that you and I are friends, and the reason why you have the beta of Quake is that you work for a magazine. 1, I don't even know you. 2, id Software does not send beta copies of games to any magazines. This would be enough for the scene to take notice and nuke the ROR Quake release and label it as fake. Many of the major bulletin boards and FTP sites decided to pull together and blacklist all future ROR releases, effectively shutting down the group. And remember that we talked about the SPA, the Software Piracy Association. That group banned all ROR releases from all sites that participated. ROR disbanded and reformed as a new group known as Reform. TKLP would lead that group and learn from his mistakes. But the race to release the final release of Quake was still on, and in the end, a smaller group known as Core Dump would beat out heavyweights Razer 1911 for the release. Razer would release their own version of Quake, which was identical to the Core Dump version, and many argued that Razer duped on the release. Duping is a term that means taking someone else's release and repackaging it as your own. In the end, going against regular scene rules, both versions were allowed to stay. Some Core Dump members insisted that Razer had duped and argued that most site operators don't have the quote balls to delete a Razer release. In the end, the 1996 late pre-release beta scandal is one of the most infamous in scene history. TKLP, whose real name is Ashed Vielson, runs a very successful record label these days, Sumerian Records. But the story of Quake and the underground scene groups will never be forgotten. And even as recently as 2011, Torrent Freak ran an article about Ed Vielson confirming his past as a member of ROR. But that will do it for today's episode, and if you like these tales of the underground scene groups, let me know in the comments below. There's plenty of others that I can definitely share with you guys going forward. But for now, we are going to leave it here for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to put a like on it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.
Who called me an airhead?
Your middle tower is under attack.
What up, right? Swoop in!
Your top tower is under attack.
Look out!
Your top tower is under attack.
Okay, kids, it's time for the talk. The Quake talk, that is. With Quake turning 20 years old on June 22nd, 2016, I think the time has come for a discussion on id Software's Lovecraftian-themed shooter. This is the full registered version for MS-DOS, sold in stores by ET Interactive. And this box art, it speaks to me. It's dark and industrial, striking yet subdued, and the Quake logo is absolutely timeless. You could slap this cover on a game today and it'd look just as fresh. The pleasing, understated package design continues around back as well, with a few choice words and screenshots lacing the cardboard, again letting you know that this is indeed the full registered version. Why does it keep saying that? Well, Quake came out right at the tail end of the age of shareware distribution on PCs, but its file size was also a lot bigger than most shareware games at the time. This led to it being distributed on CD-ROM instead of floppy disks in the same case as the registered version, so a clear distinction between the two was necessary. Opening it up reveals the game inside this fantastic trifold CD sleeve, with artwork looking like it could come straight off of a Nine Inch Nails album. And that makes a lot of sense, seeing as Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails famously scored the soundtrack to Quake, as well as choosing the sound effects and voicing the protagonist. You also get this little manual tucked away inside here, which, to save money on distribution I suppose, applies to both the shareware and the registered versions of the game. It also includes the typical macho id Software attitude in its writing, talking about how only little kids and grannies play Quake on easy mode, and dismissing questions about video game violence and Satan worshipping with a swift no. Boot up the game and you're greeted with a gameplay demo backed by a soundtrack that is unmistakably Reznor doing his thing. Now that is how you introduce a first-person shooter, an immediate display of kick-ass music and mayhem. Pressing a key opens up the main menu, and from here you're given a lot more options than many were used to in 1996, especially in regards to graphics options, seeing as this was one of the earliest first-person shooters with an engine that made full use of three-dimensional, polygon-based, texture-mapped levels and objects. Back then, this was mind-boggling stuff, considering it was using your CPU and 2D graphics card to push all this on screen, the same exact hardware that you probably used to display Microsoft Works and Quicken. Playing Quake was a magical transformation of your computer, resulting in a spectacle of 3D models and lighting effects on the PC that most people only dreamed of before this. And that was just the original game without any special hardware. If you were one of the early adopters of 3D accelerator cards, such as the legendary 3DFX Voodoo, you could take advantage of a version of the game known as GL Quake. Released in January of 1997 and named for its usage of the OpenGL graphics API, GL Quake lets you run the game at higher resolutions and frame rates with texture filtering, improved lighting, and additional reflection, shadow, and transparency effects. The rest of this video will be using GL Quake because, as much as I nostalgically enjoy the look of chunky Quake, the accelerated game is a far more player-friendly version in the end. So, onto the gameplay of Quake itself, where you begin in a room with 3 teleporters, each representing a level of difficulty. And another example of that id Software tough guy attitude, you can actually die right here in front of the hard mode portal if you fall into the lava or get hit by a fireball. Amazing. But yeah, once you've chosen the difficulty without dying, you're given the option to play the game's 4 episodes, each with a slip gate teleporting you there. This is also where you can find the secret nightmare difficulty mode, which again, I love that they made it a test in and of itself to even activate it. Just like the Nightmare mode in Doom, you're doing this of your own volition, so when it gets too hard, don't come crying to them about it. And right away, you're tossed into the action, at least on higher difficulty modes, with grunts grunting at you and Rottweilers rottweiling your face on sight, all while the CD soundtrack from Mr. Reznor drones on in the background, creating an eerie ambience that makes Quake feel like nothing else before or since.
Your middle tower is under attack. Your middle tower is under attack.
Seriously, I can't praise the music and sound design enough. I'm a big fan of ambient soundtracks and electronic weirdness and just Trent Reznor in general, so I love this stuff. The way it plays with the aesthetic of the levels and contrast are masterful, to the point where having one without the other is doable, but why would you do that? It works so well with the rusted-out industrial hallways and surreal alternate dimensions decorated with a smattering of items that utilize an unsettling twist on medieval and religious imagery. It feels like something you shouldn't be messing with when combined with the ambient music and sound. Really, the entirety of Quake is comprised of this macabre theme where something just feels wrong. Like you've stepped into a world between worlds, a mashup of designs that feels uncanny and even a bit uncomfortable. The geometry is all over the place, with level layouts and architecture that doesn't make sense, except in this realm that you're currently exploring. You just don't see this kind of design in first-person shooters anymore, where it all makes sense without making any sense. It's abstract as all hell, and yet you're never too confused as to what's going on. In the real world, the level design wouldn't work. It shouldn't work, and that's why it does work in Quake. Arguably, this makes perfect sense, seeing as there are wafts of H.P. Lovecraft all over the place, from the designs of certain enemies to the lore itself, making it clear that you're up against an unfathomable ancient foe known as Shub-Niggurath, an entity which has spawned each of the horrific creatures you have to kill. Another big reason for this weirdness is because of Quake's rocky development history, which went all the way back to the days of Commander Keen. As teased in the Vorticon's trilogy, it was going to be a top-down fantasy role-playing game with complex puzzles called The Fight for Justice. In it, you'd play as Quake, the strongest person on the continent, based on the developer's Dungeons & Dragons campaign, wielding the Hammer of Thunderbolts and other magical doohickeys. Prototyping on this Quake game started in 1991, but the title languished for years as the technology to use what they wanted to didn't quite exist yet. So id Software released Wolfenstein 3D, and then Doom, and holy crap, these games were amazing. After these, they were flush with cash, and with more experience under their belt, work on their own 3D game engine began after 1994's Doom 2. But the optimism didn't last long. The fantasy RPG concept was revisited alongside the evil Aztec themes and a time travel plot, with the game being known internally as Timequake. Then it was going to be a virtual reality title for certain VR headsets, where a large part of gameplay would revolve around speaking into a microphone to communicate with monsters and other players. This too was scrapped as development languished yet again. Finally, the team just decided to take what they had and go with a Lovecraft-inspired theme and more Doom-like gameplay, shortening the name to Quake. According to several folks at id Software, this whole process nearly ripped the company apart, and indeed, John Romero left as soon as Quake was done. So it's surprising that we got the game that we did with Quake, for what it went through on its way to store shelves. It's pretty impressive. I'd even go so far as to say that the reason Quake feels as unique as it does is due to its pandemoniacal development process. Everything from the levels to the enemies to the weapons feel like they're from different realities, and the basic loadout in Quake feels a lot like Doom, with a shotgun, super shotgun, rocket launcher, all waving around in front of you like a deadly metallic phallus. But then it also includes a hatchet, grenade launcher, and a gun that shoots freaking lightning, in addition to nail guns with ammo that sport the Nine Inch Nails logo. Then you've got magical items like the Pentagram of Protection and the Ring of Shadows, which feel like holdovers from the old fantasy RPG theme, in addition to quad damage, multiplying your damage output by 4. Quake is just a really interesting mix of sci-fi and fantasy, believable and dreamlike, finely crafted and chaotically conceived. As much criticism as it received for being just another id Software shooter early on, I feel it deserves praise for doing exactly that. The shooting and connection to your character feels satisfying for an early 3D shooter, and the level design is mesmerizingly unique, especially outside of Episode 1. Even though it lacks the interactivity of games like Duke Nukem 3D, you can tell the guys at id were confident in how they put together the maps, and while the corridors never really opened up in the areas or anything, they're assembled with such a striking design and layout that you typically don't mind. Of course, half the levels are made up of 50 shades of brown, and maybe that's not your thing. I will admit that it looks a lot more drab compared to Doom or really most anything else at the time. You know, Quake actually came out within a day of Super Mario 64, and comparatively it looks pretty dreadful. But again, I say that makes total sense here, where everything is intentionally soaked in dread, and unknown centuries of blood and rust and evil. And there's no way I can talk about Quake and not mention the overall impact it had, especially in regards to multiplayer gaming. Following up on Doom's deathmatch success, Quake made multiplayer even easier with TCP/IP and later with Quake World. While it only shipped with deathmatch and co-op multiplayer at first, fans were quick to start modding the game with a ton of legendary stuff. Not only new game modes like Capture the Flag and Rune Quake, but total conversions that turned into lasting franchises of their own, like Team Fortress. Beyond that, it was responsible for popularizing techniques and terms still in use today, like rocket jumping, bunny hopping, server browsing, and speedrunning. What's interesting is that outside of 2 official expansion packs, Quake never got a direct sequel. Quake 2 from 1997 was an awesome game in its own right, but it had no ties to the original other than the name and a few gameplay elements, and until a trademark dispute, it was going to be named something else entirely. Quake 3 Arena features some elements of both Quake 1 and 2, but again, it's a standalone experience, focusing on a solid multiplayer core and completely forgoing a single-player campaign. This numerous follow-ups and spin-offs like Quake 4, Enemy Territory Quake Wars, a Quake 3 remix known as Quake 5, and the upcoming Quake Champions being developed by id Software and Saber Interactive. Finally, there's the huge legacy of games that use the original Quake engine or one of its successors, some of which are still in use to this day in some form or another. To put it mildly, Quake sent a ripple through the gaming scene that is still felt 20 years later. The sheer accidental brilliance of the game turned into a huge success for id, despite the criticisms of its drab color palette and similar gameplay to its predecessors. Going back to play it once again was a treat, and seeing as there are tons of ways to play Quake on modern PCs through official releases and source ports nowadays, it's absolutely worth a trip across space and time to visit Quake's dimension once more. And if you enjoyed this video on Quake, perhaps you'd like to see my episodes on Doom, Wolfenstein 3D, or maybe just any number of other things that I have on my channel. I'll cover a lot of DOS games, classic PC stuff, hardware, so if you like this stuff, might as well check out some of it. There's probably something you're going to enjoy. And as always, thank you very much for watching LGR. Of all the games in my collection, few raise my excitement level at the mere sight of it like this.
We ride. Hell yeah. Peel it out. There she blows. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Might just for more. Keeping my knees in the breeze. Peel it out. I'm under attack. Hell yeah. Not ready. Oh yeah. Look out! Yeah, girl! Oh, yeah! Heat wave coming! Hell yeah! Yeah, yeah, girl! Steady on, girl!
Acid's gonna burn. We ride. Split the leg. Woohoo! Yeah, girl. What a ride! Denied. And not ready. Hell yeah!
Roshan has fallen to the ground.
It's not time yet! Look out! We ride! Yeah, come, baby! I'm under attack! There we go. Carving the legs. Triple kill. Oh, yeah. Your flesh fails you. Oh yeah.
It's the humiliation. Dire structures are fortified. Radiant structures are fortified. The enemy's bottom tower has fallen.
Killing spree. Ooh, hit a crosswind back there. What a ride. Yeah, yeah, girl. Shadow of the bat. It's not time yet. Hell yeah. Oh, yeah. Steady on, girl. Woohoo! Hey, up here. Peel it out. Keep it Sorry. Peel it out.
Your bottom tower is under attack. Your bottom tower is under attack.
Swoop in! Soaring! Hell yeah!
Double damage. Invisibility.
Yeah, girl! What a ride!
Let's heat things up.
Your bottom tower is under attack. Radiant structures are fortified.
Oh, bat, let's fly! Shadow of the bat. We ride.
Your top tower is under attack.
Keeping my knees in the breeze. Yeah, yeah, girl. There we go. What a ride. Souls on fire. Woo!
What a ride! Oh, yeah!
Your top tower has fallen.
Peeling out! What a ride! Soaring! Yeah, girl! Triple kill!
Of all the ways to die.
Keeping my knees in the breeze. Woo! Yeah, yeah, girl. Yeah, 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 yeah. There we go.
Of all the ways to die.
Steady on, girl. We ride.
The enemy's top tower has fallen.
Peeling out.
Dire structures are fortified.
Woo-hoo! Sorry. I'm under attack.
The enemy's top barracks has fallen. Enemy's top barracks has fallen. Dire structures are fortified. Radiant structures are fortified. The enemy's middle tower has fallen.